The snow fell thick and heavy over Manhattan on Christmas Eve, blanketing the city in white silence. Inside his penthouse overlooking Central Park, Wellington stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, a glass of whiskey untouched in his hand. At 38, he had built an empire from nothing, turning a small tech startup into a billion-dollar corporation. Yet tonight, surrounded by luxury and success, he felt nothing but emptiness. His phone buzzed on the marble counter. Ignored it, knowing it would be another invitation to some lavish holiday party where fake smiles and shallow conversations passed for companionship. He had attended enough of those gatherings to last a lifetime. The business world celebrated him as a genius, a visionary, but nobody really knew him. Nobody asked about the boy who grew up in foster care, who slept in shelters, who promised himself that one day he would never be cold or hungry again. The phone buzzed again, more insistently this time. With a sigh, picked it up and saw a message from his assistant, Jennifer. It was brief and unusual. "Sorry to bother you on Christmas Eve, but there's a situation at the loading dock of Wellington Tower. Security called. They need you to come down." Frowned, his company headquarters was only 3 blocks away and he owned the entire building. What kind of situation required his personal attention on Christmas Eve? Everyone should have been gone hours ago. He typed back quickly, asking for details, but Jennifer's response was cryptic. "It's complicated. I think you need to see this yourself." 20 minutes later, stepped out of his private elevator into the underground loading area of Wellington Tower. The concrete space was dimly lit, designed for deliveries and freight. 2 security guards stood near the service entrance, and between them sat a young woman on a wooden crate. She wore a thin cotton dress that seemed more suitable for summer than a New York winter, and her feet were wrapped in cloth that had once been white, but was now stained with mud and street grime. No coat, no shoes, no bags. Approached slowly, taking in the scene. The woman looked up at him, and he found himself staring into the most striking pair of dark brown eyes he had ever seen. Despite her obvious exhaustion and the way she trembled from cold, there was something fierce and unbroken in her gaze. She was young, probably in her mid-20s, with deep brown skin and thick black hair pulled back in a simple braid. Her beauty was undeniable, but it was her expression that caught him. Pride mixed with desperation, dignity struggling against circumstance. "Mr. Wellington," one of the security guards, a man named Davis, stepped forward. "We found her trying to shelter in the loading bay about an hour ago. She says she's supposed to be here, but she doesn't have any identification or paperwork. We were about to call the police when she mentioned your name." Looked at the woman again. "You mentioned my name." She stood up, wincing slightly as she put weight on her damaged feet. When she spoke, her voice was steady despite her obvious physical distress. "My name is... I was told to come to this address. I was told Wellington was expecting me." The name meant nothing too. He shook his head slowly. "I'm sorry, but I don't know you. There must be some mistake." Reached into the pocket of her thin dress and pulled out a crumpled piece of paper. Her hands shook as she unfolded it and noticed her fingers were raw and red from cold. She held the paper out to him. "This is the address I was given. This is where I was supposed to go." Took the paper, studying it under the harsh fluorescent lights. The handwriting was familiar, elegant, and precise. His breath caught in his throat as recognition dawned. This was his late grandmother's handwriting. Rose Wellington had been the only person in his foster care years who believed in him, who visited him, who promised him a better future. She had passed away 6 months ago, leaving him her entire estate, including some unusual bequests that her lawyer was still processing. "Where did you get this?" asked, his voice quiet. "Your grandmother arranged for me to come here," said. "I'm from Nigeria. She paid for everything, my visa, my ticket, my documentation. She said I would have a home here, that I would work for her grandson. That was the arrangement." Felt his world tilt slightly. His grandmother had done many eccentric things in her life, but this? "My grandmother died 6 months ago." His face crumpled for just a moment before she regained control. "I know. Her lawyer contacted me after she passed. He said the arrangement still stood, that I should come as planned. I arrived at the airport 3 days ago, but there was nobody there to meet me. The lawyer's number doesn't work anymore. I had this address, so I came here." 3 days ago? Looked at her ragged appearance with new understanding. "Where have you been staying?" "Wherever I could," said simply. "I slept in the airport the first night, but security made me leave. I've been walking the streets since then, trying to figure out what to do. I went to the address on the paper during the day, but the building was closed for the holiday. I came back tonight because I had nowhere else to go." Davis, the security guard, cleared his throat. "Sir, what do you want us to do? Should we call someone?" Looked at again, really looked at her. She stood there in her summer dress and wrapped feet, shivering but refusing to show weakness. She had traveled across an ocean based on the promise of a woman who was now dead, only to find herself alone in a foreign city during the coldest part of winter. A lesser person would have broken down completely, but stood tall, meeting his gaze with that same fierce dignity. Something in his chest tightened. He saw himself in her somehow, the determination not to be defeated by circumstance, the refusal to beg even when desperate. He made a decision that surprised even himself. "She's coming with me," said. "Davis, get me a blanket from the emergency supplies." His eyes widened. "I don't need charity. Your grandmother promised me work. I'm here to work to earn my keep. I don't want handouts." "It's Christmas Eve," said. "We'll sort out the details later. Right now you need to get warm and eat something. My grandmother clearly had some arrangement in mind, and I intend to honor that. But first, we're going to make sure you don't freeze to death." Davis returned with a thick emergency blanket and wrapped it around shoulders himself. She flinched at the contact, as if she wasn't used to kindness, but then relaxed slightly into the warmth. Noticed she was even thinner than he had first thought, her collarbones prominent beneath the thin fabric of her dress. "When did you last eat?" he asked. Hesitated. "I had some bread yesterday morning. A woman at a church gave it to me." Felt anger rise in him, though he wasn't sure who it was directed at. His grandmother for creating this situation, the lawyer who had abandoned this girl, the world for being so cruel. He pushed the emotion down and focused on the practical. "Can you walk?" he asked. "Yes," said, though he noticed her wince again. Turned to Davis. "Call my driver, have him bring the car around to the service entrance. And Davis, thank you for not just sending her away." "She seemed different from the usual people we find trying to shelter here," Davis said. "Something told me to wait before making the call." Nodded and guided toward the elevator. She moved slowly, obviously in pain, but she didn't complain. In the elevator, studied her reflection in the polished steel doors. Even in her disheveled state, there was something remarkable about her, a strength that transcended her circumstances. "Why did my grandmother choose you?" asked. "How did you know her?" Was quiet for a moment and thought she might not answer. Then she spoke, her voice soft. "I was a teacher in a small village outside Lagos. Your grandmother came there 2 years ago with a charity organization. They were building a school. She spent time in our village, talking to people, learning about our lives. She seemed very interested in education, in helping young women." "That sounds like Rose," said. His grandmother had spent her later years involved in various charitable causes, traveling the world even as her health declined. "She asked me about my dreams," continued. "I told her I wanted to study more to become a better teacher, maybe even open my own school one day. But there was no money for that, no opportunity. My family needed me to work to help support my younger siblings. She listened to everything I said, and before she left, she told me she had an idea." The elevator doors opened into the parking garage where Scar waited, a sleek black sedan with his driver, Robert, standing beside it. Robert's eyes widened when he saw, but he was professional enough not to comment. He simply opened the back door. Helped into the car, then slid in beside her. The heated leather seats and warm air from the vents made her sigh with relief. Robert closed the door and got behind the wheel. "Where to, Mr. Wellington?" Robert asked. "Home," said. "And Robert, stop at the first open pharmacy you see. We need first aid supplies." As they drove through the snowy streets, gazed out the window with wide eyes. "I have never seen snow before," she said quietly. "Only in pictures, it's beautiful." "It's also dangerous if you're not dressed for it," said. "I need to understand the full situation. What exactly did my grandmother promise you?" Turned to face him, the blanket still wrapped tightly around her shoulders. "She said she would bring me to America, that I would work in her grandson's home, help manage his household. She said you were a very busy man who needed someone reliable. In exchange, she would pay me a salary and cover my education. She wanted me to attend university to study business and education. She said you would sponsor my student visa." Absorbed this information. It was exactly the kind of thing his grandmother would do, creating elaborate plans to help people while also arranging his life the way she thought it should be. Rose Wellington had frequently complained that worked too hard, that his penthouse was too sterile, that he needed someone to take care of him. He had always laughed off her concerns, insisting he was fine on his own. But now, sitting next to this young woman who had crossed an ocean based on his grandmother's promise, felt the weight of responsibility. Rose had set something in motion, and he couldn't simply ignore it. More than that, something about intrigued him. Her strength, her pride, the way she insisted she wanted to work rather than accept charity. They stopped at an all-night pharmacy and went in himself, buying bandages, antibiotic ointment, pain medication, and anything else he thought might be useful. When he returned to the car, he found it dozed off, her head resting against the window. She looked younger in sleep, vulnerable in a way she refused to be while awake. The drive to his building took only a few more minutes. When they arrived, gently touched shoulder to wake her. She jerked awake instantly, looking around in confusion before remembering where she was. "We're here," said. "Can you make it inside?" Nodded and stepped out of the car with help. In the lobby of his building, the night doorman's eyes widened at the sight of them, but ignored the curiosity. The elevator ride to the penthouse felt longer than usual, and found himself acutely aware of how must be feeling. Exhausted, in pain, in a strange place with a man she didn't know. The elevator opened directly into his penthouse and stepped into the sprawling space with obvious amazement. Floor-to-ceiling windows showed the snowy city spread out below. Modern furniture in blacks and grays filled the open living area. Everything was clean, expensive, and utterly impersonal. "You live here alone?" asked, her voice echoing slightly in the large space. "Yes," said. He suddenly saw his home through her eyes and felt embarrassed by its cold perfection. "It's more space than I need. The guest rooms are this way." He led her down a hallway to one of the guest suites. The room had its own bathroom and a comfortable bed with crisp white linens. Set the pharmacy bag on the dresser. "The bathroom is through there," he said. "There should be towels and everything you need. Take a hot shower, take care of your feet. There's a robe hanging on the back of the door. I'll find you some clothes and leave them outside the door. When you're ready, come to the kitchen. I'll make us something to eat." Looked at him with those intense dark eyes. "Why are you doing this? You don't know me. For all you know, I could be lying about everything." Considered the question. "My grandmother had good instincts about people. She saw something in you worth investing in. And honestly, I've spent enough time reading people in the business world to recognize sincerity when I see it. You're not lying." "How can you be sure?" "Because a con artist would have had a better story, better preparations. You'd have identification, a place to stay, a more polished approach. You're exactly what you claim to be, someone who trusted the wrong lawyer and ended up stranded." Moved toward the door. "Take your time. We'll figure out the rest tomorrow." He left alone and went to his own room, where he rummaged through drawers to find something she could wear. He settled on a soft sweatshirt and sweatpants, both far too large for her but better than nothing. He left them folded outside her door, then went to the kitchen. Wasn't much of a cook, but he could manage basic meals. He put together sandwiches with good bread, turkey, cheese, and vegetables. He heated soup on the stove and made hot tea. As he worked, he thought about the strange turn his evening had taken. This morning, he had woken up dreading another lonely Christmas. Now he had a young woman from Nigeria who his grandmother had recruited for mysterious purposes. The whole situation was bizarre, but found he didn't mind. There was something refreshing about her directness, her refusal to play games. She reminded him of himself at that age, hungry for opportunity but determined to earn it rather than accept charity. 30 minutes later appeared in the kitchen doorway. She had showered, and her thick black hair hung wet down her back. The oversized sweatshirt and pants made her look even smaller than she was, but her face showed relief. Clean and warm, she was strikingly beautiful. "Thank you for the clothes," she said, padding into the kitchen on bare feet that were now properly bandaged. "And for the first aid supplies. My feet were worse than I thought." "Sit," said, gesturing to the bar stools at the kitchen island. He placed a bowl of hot soup in front of her, then a plate with a sandwich. "Eat slowly. You don't want to make yourself sick." Stared at the food for a moment and saw her throat work as she swallowed hard. Then she picked up the spoon with a shaking hand and took a small sip of soup. She closed her eyes, and a single tear rolled down her cheek. "I'm sorry," she said, wiping the tear away quickly. "I didn't realize how hungry I was, how scared I was. I kept telling myself I would figure it out, that I had to stay strong." "You've been incredibly strong," said, "but you're safe now, you can relax." They ate in comfortable silence for a while. Made himself a sandwich too, more to keep her company than from hunger. He watched as color slowly returned to his face, as the tension in her shoulders eased slightly. Tell me more about your life in Nigeria, said. What was your village like? His expression softened. It's a small place, maybe 300 people. Everyone knows everyone. I taught at the primary school, mostly young children. I loved it, even though we had so few resources. The children were eager to learn, so curious about everything. She paused, taking another careful bite of her sandwich. I have 3 younger siblings, 2 sisters and a brother. I was sending most of my salary home to help support them to pay for their schooling. Were they okay with you leaving? My mother was worried, but she understood the opportunity. Your grandmother promised to help my family too, to ensure my siblings could continue their education. That was part of why I agreed to come. I thought I could build a better life and help them at the same time. Nodded slowly. His grandmother had created an elaborate web of obligation and opportunity, binding to the arrangement through her love for her family. It was manipulative in a way, but also generous. Rose Wellington had always believed in helping people who wanted to help themselves and their communities. What about the lawyer who was supposed to meet you? Asked. Do you remember his name? James said. He sent me several emails after your grandmother passed away, confirming the arrangement was still in place. He sent me the plane ticket and told me he would meet me at the airport. But when I landed, nobody was there. I tried calling the number he gave me, but it was disconnected. I tried emailing, but got no response. Made a mental note to have his own lawyers look into. Something was clearly wrong there, either fraud or incompetence. But that was a problem for tomorrow. It's late, said. You should sleep. We'll talk more in the morning and figure out what comes next. Looked at him with uncertainty. What does come next? Are you going to send me back to Nigeria? Thought about it? The logical answer was probably yes. Whatever arrangement his grandmother had made had clearly fallen apart. But thinking about her strength and determination, he found himself unwilling to simply ship her home like a returned package. That depends, said. You said you came here to work to earn your education. Are you still willing to do that? Yes, said immediately. I didn't cross an ocean to give up at the first difficulty. Then we'll honor my grandmother's arrangement, said. The words surprised him even as he spoke them, but they felt right. You'll work for me, help manage my household. I'll sponsor your education. We'll make it legitimate with a proper contract and everything above board. But I need to know you're serious about this. His eyes filled with tears again, but this time she didn't try to hide them. I'm serious. I will work harder than anyone you've ever known. I will make your grandmother proud that she chose me. I promise you that. Believed her, standing there in his too large clothes with tears running down her face, radiated determination and gratitude. He had made plenty of business decisions in his life, some good and some bad, but this one felt different. This felt personal in a way that both scared and excited him. Then we have a deal, said. Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas, Mr. Wellington. He corrected. If you're going to be living here, you should call me. Smiled a real smile that transformed her entire face. Then Merry Christmas. They finished their meal and showed back to her room. He left her there with the promise that they would talk more in the morning, that everything would look better after a good night's sleep. As he walked back to his own room, felt something he hadn't experienced in years. A sense of purpose beyond business deals and profit margins. A connection to another human being that felt genuine and uncomplicated. He stood at his bedroom window looking out at the snow-covered city. Somewhere out there, people were celebrating Christmas with their families, exchanging gifts and sharing meals. For so many years, had spent the holidays alone, telling himself he preferred it that way. But tonight, with sleeping down the hall, he didn't feel alone. He felt responsible, yes, but also hopeful. His grandmother had always told him that wealth meant nothing if you didn't use it to help others, that success was hollow without purpose. Had built his empire, proved he could rise from nothing to everything. But maybe Rose Wellington had seen that he was missing something essential. Maybe she had known, even as she was dying, that her grandson needed to be needed by someone, that he needed to remember what it felt like to have nothing and help someone else climb out of that pit. Christmas morning would bring new challenges and difficult questions. They would need to sort out legal issues, contact immigration lawyers, establish clear boundaries and expectations. But for now, on this Christmas Eve, allowed himself to simply feel grateful. Grateful that Davis had waited before calling the police. Grateful that had been brave enough to survive 3 days on the streets of New York. Grateful that his grandmother, even from beyond the grave, was still trying to make his life better. As he finally climbed into bed, smiled. It had been a strange evening, one of the most unusual of his life. But it had also been meaningful in a way that all his business successes had never quite achieved. He had helped someone who truly needed help, and in doing so, perhaps helped himself as well. Woke on Christmas morning to the smell of coffee brewing. For a moment, he thought he was dreaming, then remembered the events of the previous night. He threw on a robe and made his way to the kitchen, where he found her standing at the counter, looking uncertain as she examined his expensive coffee machine. "I hope you don't mind," she said, turning to face him. "I woke early and wanted to make myself useful, but this machine is more complicated than anything I've used before." Smiled and moved to help her. "It's unnecessarily complex. My grandmother bought it for me, claimed I needed to appreciate good coffee." He quickly prepared 2 cups, showing how to operate the machine. "How did you sleep?" "Better than I have in days," admitted. "The bed was so soft I thought I might sink into it forever, and being warm, truly warm, felt like a luxury I'd forgotten existed." She was wearing the same oversized clothes from the night before, her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. In the morning light streaming through the windows, noticed details he had missed before. A small scar above her left eyebrow, the way her fingers were calloused from work, the intelligence that shone in her eyes when she looked at him. "We need to get you some proper clothes today," said, "and shoes that actually fit." His expression became guarded. "I can't afford new clothes right now. The money I had was stolen on my second day. I was sleeping in the airport when someone took my bag with everything in it." Felt another wave of anger at the circumstances that had brought this young woman to such desperation. "Consider it an advance on your salary. You can't work for me dressed in my sweatpants." "What exactly would my work be?" asked. She cradled her coffee cup in both hands, as if drawing comfort from its warmth. "Your grandmother mentioned managing your household, but I'm not sure what that means in this context. You seem quite capable of taking care of yourself." Laughed a real laugh that surprised him. "You'd think so, wouldn't you? But the truth is, I live like a robot. I work 16-hour days, eat takeout at my desk, and only come home to sleep. This penthouse is just an expensive hotel room. My grandmother used to complain that I had no life outside of work, that I was wasting my success by never actually living. And she thought I could change that." Apparently, sat on one of the bar stools, gesturing for to do the same. "Rose was always trying to fix me. She wanted me to have a proper home, regular meals, some semblance of normal life. I think she envisioned you organizing this chaos, making it feel less like an office and more like a place where someone actually lives." Looked around the pristine kitchen, then back at. "But what about companionship? Did she think of that? A household manager is usually older, experienced in running large homes. I'm 24 years old. I taught children in a village school. I know nothing about managing a billionaire's life." "Maybe that's exactly why she chose you," said thoughtfully. "Rose didn't want someone who would just maintain the status. She wanted someone who would challenge me, make me think differently about how I live." He paused, studying his face. "Tell me honestly, what do you think of my home?" Hesitated, clearly weighing honesty against politeness. Finally, she spoke. "It's beautiful but empty, like a magazine photograph. There's nothing personal here, no warmth. It doesn't feel like anyone lives here, just exists between work hours." Nodded. "That's exactly what Rose would have said. So here's what I'm thinking. We start simple. You help me make this place feel more like a home. Cook real meals, add personal touches, generally organize things in a way that makes sense. In return, I pay you a fair salary and sponsor your education. You enroll in university next semester and study whatever you want." "Just like that?" Looked skeptical. "You're going to trust a stranger to live in your home, have access to everything, all based on my grandmother's plan." "I'm going to honor my grandmother's wishes and give you the opportunity she promised," corrected. "But you're right to question it. We'll need proper legal documents, background checks, a formal contract. I'll have my lawyers draw everything up. This will be completely legitimate and above board." Set down her coffee cup and saw her hands were shaking slightly. "Why? You could easily send me home, tell me the arrangement died with your grandmother. Nobody would blame you. Instead, you're offering me everything I crossed an ocean to find. Why would you do that for a stranger?" Thought about how to answer. The truth was complex, a mixture of honoring his grandmother's memory, recognizing something of himself in his determination, and the simple fact that he was tired of being alone. But he settled on the simplest truth. "Because someone gave me a chance once when I had nothing. Rose found me in the foster system, convinced a judge to let her mentor me, helped me get into college. Everything I have started with her believing in me when nobody else did. She saw something in you too, and I trust her judgment. Maybe it's time I paid forward what she gave me." His eyes glistened with unshed tears. "I won't disappoint you. I promise I'll work harder than anyone you've ever known." "I believe you," said. "But let's be clear about something. This isn't charity and you're not a servant. We're creating a partnership here, one where we both benefit. I get help organizing my life, you get opportunities for education and growth. We're going to treat each other with respect and honesty." "Agreed." "Agreed," said firmly. They spent the rest of Christmas morning in surprisingly comfortable conversation. Learned more about life in Nigeria, her dreams of opening a school that combined traditional learning with modern technology, her close relationship with her siblings. In turn, he found himself sharing stories about his own childhood, the years bouncing between foster homes, the loneliness that success had never quite erased. Around noon, called his driver and they ventured out into the snowy city. Most stores were closed for Christmas, but knew which luxury shops stayed open for their most exclusive clientele. At a high-end department store, he watched as carefully selected practical items, quality pieces that would last but nothing ostentatious. "You can get more than that," said, nodding she had chosen only 3 outfits and basic necessities. "You'll need variety." "This is already too much," protested. "These clothes cost more than I earned in 3 months teaching." "Consider it part of your relocation package," said. He had already spoken with the personal shopper, a woman named who had worked with his grandmother. "Please help Ms. select a proper wardrobe. Professional attire, casual clothes, workout gear, the complete package. Spare no expense." Over's protests whisked her away. Waited in the private shopping lounge, answering emails on his phone and trying not to think too hard about what he was doing. By any rational measure, this was impulsive and potentially foolish. He was inviting a virtual stranger into his life based on the word of his dead grandmother and his own gut instinct. His board of directors would be horrified. But had built his fortune on calculated risks and trusting his instincts. Something told him that was worth the gamble. She had survived 3 days on the streets of New York without breaking, had maintained her dignity and pride even in desperation. That took strength of character that couldn't be faked. 2 hours later, emerged from the dressing area wearing dark jeans, a soft cream sweater, and proper winter boots. She looked transformed, though her expression showed discomfort at the expense. "I tried to be reasonable," she said too, "but insisted on so many things." "Knows what she's doing," assured her. "You need proper clothes for a New York winter, consider it done." They returned to the penthouse with multiple shopping bags. While put away her new belongings, made phone calls, setting the wheels in motion for everything that needed to happen. He called his immigration lawyer, explaining the situation and asking for emergency assistance. He called his personal attorney to draft employment contracts. He even called a private investigator to look into James, the lawyer who had abandoned at the airport. By evening, felt he had done everything possible to legitimize and protect the arrangement. Now came the harder part, actually figuring out how to live with someone after years of solitude. They ordered Chinese food for dinner, since admitted he couldn't cook anything more complicated than sandwiches. They ate at the dining table that usually ignored, using actual plates and silverware instead of eating from containers at his desk. "This is nice," said, looking around the dining room. "When was the last time you ate dinner at this table?" "Thought about it? I honestly can't remember, maybe never. I usually work through dinner." "That's going to change," said with unexpected firmness. "One of my duties as household manager will be ensuring you actually eat proper meals. Your grandmother would want that." Raised an eyebrow, already taking charge. "You hired me to organize your life," said. "That includes making sure you don't work yourself to death." She paused, then added more softly, "If that's all right with you." "It's more than all right," said. "It's exactly what Rose wanted. She used to lecture me constantly about work-life balance." They talked late into the evening, the conversation flowing easily. Told him about Nigerian culture, the foods she missed, the music she grew up with. Found himself genuinely engaged, asking questions and sharing his own experiences. It had been so long since he'd had a real conversation with someone, not a business negotiation or superficial small talk at a networking event, but an actual human connection. Around 10, yawned and apologized. "I'm sorry, I'm still adjusting to the time change. Everything feels strange and dreamlike." "Get some rest," said. Tomorrow we'll start making everything official. I'll introduce you to my lawyers, we'll get your documentation sorted out, and we'll establish a real routine. Stood, then hesitated. Can I ask you something personal? Of course. Why are you really doing this? And please don't say it's just to honor your grandmother's wishes. There's something else, I can sense it. Considered lying or deflecting, but directness deserved honesty in return. My grandmother used to tell me that success without purpose is just accumulated wealth, that having everything means nothing if you have nobody to share it with. I've spent the last 10 years proving I could build an empire, but somewhere along the way, I forgot how to build a life. Maybe having you here will remind me. Maybe helping you achieve your dreams will give my success some meaning beyond numbers in a bank account. Nodded slowly. That's honest, I appreciate that. I'll try to live up to what you're hopping for. Just be yourself, said. That's all I ask. After went to bed, stood at his windows again, looking out at the city. Everything had changed in the span of 24 hours. Yesterday he had been alone, going through the motions of a life that felt increasingly hollow. Tonight he had purpose. Someone was depending on him, and he had committed to helping her build a better future. It felt good, scary and uncertain, but good. The next morning, woke to the sound of movement in the kitchen. He found there, this time successfully operating the coffee machine and cooking eggs on the stove. She had figured out where everything was and had made herself at home in a way that felt natural rather than intrusive. Good morning, she said cheerfully. I hope scrambled eggs are okay. I didn't want to make anything too complicated until I know your preferences. Sat at the kitchen island, accepting a plate of perfectly cooked eggs with toast. This is fantastic. I can't remember the last time someone made me breakfast. Get used to it, said. Breakfast is the most important meal, and I'm not letting you skip it anymore. They ate together and found he enjoyed the routine of it. After breakfast, they went to his lawyer's office. David was a sharp attorney in his 50s who had handled personal legal matters for years. He listened carefully as explained the situation, taking notes and occasionally asking questions. This is unusual, David said finally, but not impossible. We'll need to file the proper paperwork with immigration, establish Ms. legal status, and create an employment contract that protects both of you. It's going to take time, probably several weeks at minimum. Whatever it takes, said. I want everything done correctly. David nodded and turned to. Ms., you understand that this arrangement makes you dependent on Mr. Wellington for your legal status in the country. If the employment ends for any reason, you would need to find alternative sponsorship or return to Nigeria. I understand, said steadily. I'm willing to accept those terms. They spent hours going over details, signing preliminary documents, providing information. By the time they left David's office, both were exhausted but satisfied that things were moving in the right direction. Over the next 2 weeks, they settled into a rhythm. Woke early and prepared breakfast, something had never taken time for before. She organized his home, adding small personal touches that made the sterile penthouse feel warmer. Plants appeared in the living room. Books materialized on previously empty shelves. The kitchen began to smell like real cooking instead of takeout containers. Found himself coming home earlier, drawn by the knowledge that someone was there waiting. They would eat dinner together and would tell him about her day, exploring the city, researching universities, learning about American culture. In turn, would share stories about his work, explaining his business in ways she could understand. One evening, about 3 weeks after Christmas, they were having dinner when his phone rang. She glanced at the screen and her face lit up. It's my mother, she said. May I? Of course, said, leaving the table to give her privacy. He could hear speaking in what he assumed was Igbo, her voice animated and happy. The conversation lasted nearly an hour. When she finally hung up, there were tears streaming down her face, but she was smiling. Everything okay? Asked, returning to the dining room. Better than okay, said. I was able to tell my mother I'm safe, that I have a good situation here. She was so worried. And the money your grandmother arranged for my family, it actually came through. My siblings can continue school. My mother can repair our house. Everything she promised is happening. Felt a lump in his throat. His grandmother had thought of everything, had made sure his family was taken care of even after death. It was so typically Rose, taking care of everyone while pretending she wasn't doing anything special. I'm glad, he said simply. There's more, said, wiping her tears. My sister, she's 12, she got the highest marks in her class this term. She wants to be a doctor. Because of your grandmother's gift, she'll be able to pursue that dream. His voice broke. Do you understand what that means? In my village, girls often stop school early to work or marry. But now my sisters have real futures. Because Rose Wellington believed in me, believed in my family. Understood perfectly. It was the same gift Rose had given him years ago, the belief that his circumstances didn't define his potential. His grandmother had seen beyond the foster kid with nothing to his name and imagined who he could become. Now she had done the same for and her family. Rose had a gift for seeing potential in people, said. She changed my life and clearly she's changed yours too. And now you're continuing her work, said, looking at him with an intensity that made his heart skip. You didn't have to honor her arrangement. You could have sent me home with a plain ticket and a clear conscience, but you're giving me the opportunity she promised. Why? Had asked himself the same question many times over the past 3 weeks. The answer had become clearer with each passing day. Because having you here has changed something in me, he admitted. For the first time in years, I look forward to coming home. I actually taste the food I eat. I notice things like how the light hits the snow outside the windows. You've reminded me that life is more than work and accumulation. You've brought warmth into a very cold existence. Was quiet for a long moment. Then she reached across the table and took his hand, a gesture that felt natural despite its significance. Thank you, she said simply, for seeing me, for believing in me, for giving me this chance. I promise I'll make the most of it. Squeezed her hand gently, then released it. They finished dinner in companionable silence, both lost in their own thoughts about how dramatically life could change in such a short time. Later that night, reviewed the preliminary acceptance letter from Columbia University. Had applied to their education program and, with financial sponsorship, had been fast-tracked for admission in the spring semester. She would start classes in just a few weeks. He thought about how different his life looked now compared to a month ago. His home felt alive with his presence. He ate regular meals. He had someone to talk to about more than just business. It wasn't a romantic relationship, not yet at least, but it was genuine human connection, something he had been starving for without realizing it. Also thought about the responsibility he had taken on. Was depending on him for her legal status, her education, her entire future in America. That was a heavy weight, but one he was willing to carry. Because Rose had carried that weight for him once, and it had made all the difference. His phone buzzed with a message from David. The immigration paperwork had been approved. His work visa was official. She was legally authorized to live and work in the United States under sponsorship. Went to find who was reading in the living room. When he shared the news, she jumped up with a cry of joy, then stopped herself, suddenly self-conscious. Sorry, she said, this is real now, it's actually happening. It's happening, confirmed. You start at Columbia in 3 weeks. Your American dream is beginning. She smiled at him, that brilliant smile that transformed her entire face. Our American dream, she corrected. Because you're part of this story too now. We're building something together, even if we're not entirely sure what it is yet. Realized she was right. What had started as honoring his grandmother's eccentric final wish had become something more complex and meaningful. They were two people from completely different worlds who had found unexpected companionship in each other. Where it would lead, neither of them knew. But for the first time in years, was excited to find out. The snow continued to fall outside the windows, blanketing New York in white. Inside the penthouse that had once felt like a museum, two people sat together in comfortable silence, each grateful for the unexpected gift they had been given. Not just the practical benefits of their arrangement, but the simple human connection that made life worth living. Rose Wellington would have been pleased, thought. She had set out to fix his empty life, and in her own mysterious way, she had succeeded. The black girl she had found teaching in a Nigerian village had brought light into her grandson's darkness, and in return, he was giving her the opportunity to shine even brighter. It was, reflected, exactly the kind of beautiful symmetry Rose had always believed in. Give with an open hand and receive more than you could imagine. Love unconditionally and be loved in return. See potential in people and watch them exceed every expectation. As the evening wore on and they finally said goodnight, felt something he hadn't experienced in far too long. Hope. Not just for himself, but for the future they were building together, and for the possibility that maybe, just maybe, the best parts of his life were still ahead of him. The mail-order girl who had arrived in rags on Christmas Eve had turned out to be exactly what he needed, even though he hadn't known he needed anything at all. And that, thought as he finally effed the spring semester at Columbia, began on a cold January morning. Insisted on driving to campus himself, despite her protests that she could take the subway like any other student. As they pulled up to the imposing university buildings, he saw nervousness flicker across her face for the first time since Christmas. "You're going to do great," said, sensing her anxiety. "You're smarter and more determined than half the people here who had every advantage handed to them." "What if I can't keep up?" asked quietly. "What if my education in Nigeria didn't prepare me enough? What if they realize I don't belong here?" Turned to face her fully. "Listen to me. I felt exactly the same way when I started college. I was a foster kid who had barely graduated high school, surrounded by people who had private tutors and SAT prep courses. But you know what I learned? Intelligence isn't about where you start. It's about how hard you're willing to work and how much you want to learn. Nobody works harder than you. Nobody wants this more. That's going to make all the difference." Took a deep breath and nodded. "Okay, you're right. I didn't come all this way to doubt myself now." "That's the spirit," said. "Now go show them what a Nigerian village teacher can do." She grabbed her new backpack, another purchase had insisted on, and stepped out of the car. Before closing the door, she leaned back in. "Thank you for everything." "Text me when you're done," he said. "I'll pick you up." Watched her walk toward the campus buildings, her head held high despite her nervousness. He felt an unexpected surge of pride and something else he couldn't quite name. Over the past month had become more than just a household employee. She had become a friend, a companion, someone whose happiness mattered to him in ways that went beyond their business arrangement. That realization should have concerned him, had built his success by maintaining clear boundaries, by not letting emotions cloud his judgment. But with those carefully constructed walls seemed to crumble without him even noticing. He looked forward to coming home each day. He found himself thinking about her during meetings. He cared what she thought about his decisions. Robert, his driver, caught his eye in the mirror. "She's special, that one," the older man said. "Reminds me of my daughter when she started college, scared but determined not to show it." "She is special," agreed. Then, trying to sound casual, "What does your daughter do now?" "She's a surgeon," Robert said with obvious pride. "Told me she was going to medical school, and I thought she was dreaming too big, but she proved me wrong. Sometimes the ones who start with nothing end up achieving the most because they understand what it took to get there." Thought about that as they drove to his office. He had achieved enormous success, built a company worth billions, but had he really understood what it took? Or had he just been running from poverty so fast that he never stopped to appreciate the journey? Seemed to savor every moment of her opportunity, finding joy in simple things like a warm meal or a good book. Maybe she could teach him something about that too. His day was filled with meetings and conference calls, the usual demands of running a technology empire. But during a break, found himself checking his phone for messages from. She had sent a text around noon. "First classes went well. Professors are intimidating but brilliant. I think I'm going to learn so much here." Smiled and typed back, "Told you, you've got this." When he picked her up that evening, was practically glowing with excitement. She climbed into the car and immediately launched into a detailed description of her classes, her professors, the other students she had met. "There's this woman, she's from Kenya," said, her words tumbling over each other. "She's studying international education policy too. We're going to be study partners. And Professor, he taught at Oxford for 10 years before coming here. The things he knows about educational systems around the world, it's incredible." Loved seeing her so animated, so it was a good day. Better than good, it was perfect. Paused, then added more quietly, "I felt like I belonged there. Not at first, I was terrified. But once the classes started and the professors began teaching, I realized I could understand everything. I could contribute to discussions. I wasn't behind at all." "Of course you weren't," said. "You're exactly where you're supposed to be." They fell into a comfortable routine over the following weeks. Would wake early to study before her classes, would drive her to campus most mornings, and they would have dinner together in the evenings while she told him about what she had learned. The penthouse continued to transform under her influence, becoming warmer and more personal. Had a gift for creating comfortable spaces. She rearranged furniture to make conversation areas instead of just display arrangements. She filled the kitchen with spices and ingredients from around the world, experimenting with recipes that filled the home with delicious aromas. She even convinced to let her hang some artwork, pieces from African artists that brought color and life to the previously stark white walls. One Friday evening in late February, came home to find in the kitchen with music playing, something with drums and melodic singing in a language he didn't recognize. She was cooking something that smelled amazing, moving to the rhythm of the music as she worked. "What's all this?" asked, loosening his tie. "I'm celebrating," said, turning to face him with a huge smile. "I got an A on my first major paper. Professor said it was one of the best analyses he'd read from a first-year student." "That's fantastic," said, genuinely thrilled for her. "What was the paper about?" "Comparing educational outcomes in rural versus urban areas in developing countries, using Nigeria and Kenya as case studies. I argued that the traditional model of centralizing education in cities actually perpetuates inequality rather than solving it." She paused, looking slightly embarrassed. "Sorry, you probably don't want to hear me talk about educational policy all night." "Actually, I do," said, surprising himself with how much he meant it. "I want to hear everything, but first, what are you cooking? It smells incredible." "Rice," said. "It's a West African dish, my mother's recipe. I thought we should celebrate properly." They ate dinner together and explained her paper in detail. Found himself genuinely engaged in the topic, asking questions and offering perspectives from his own experience with education. The conversation flowed naturally into other subjects: politics, culture, philosophy, the kinds of deep discussions rarely had with anyone anymore. As they finished eating, poured them each a glass of wine. "I want to make a toast," he said, raising his glass. "To brilliant student and excellent cook, may this be the first of many." Clinked her glass against his, her eyes shining. "Thank you for believing in me, for making this all possible." "You're making it possible," corrected. "I'm just providing resources, you're doing all the hard work." "We're partners," said softly. "That's what you said at the beginning, remember. We're both benefiting from this arrangement." "Are you?" asked. "Benefiting, I mean, is this what you hoped it would be?" Considered the question seriously. "It's different from what I expected, but better in many ways. I thought I would just be working as a housekeeper, studying on the side. Instead, you've given me space to focus on my education. You've made me feel like an equal rather than an employee, and beyond that, you've become a friend. I didn't expect that." Felt something shift in his chest at her words. "I didn't expect it either," he admitted. "But I'm glad it happened. This past month and a half, having you here, it's changed my life in ways I'm still trying to understand." They were sitting close together on the couch and became acutely aware of the intimacy of the moment. Was looking at him with an expression he couldn't quite read, something between gratitude and something deeper. The air between them felt charged with possibility. Then's phone rang, breaking the spell. She glanced at the screen and smiled. "It's my sister, do you mind?" "Of course not," said, relieved and disappointed in equal measure. Answered the phone and could hear excited chatter from the other end. Laughed, responding in Igbo, her whole face lighting up with joy. After several minutes, she held the phone toward. "Want to say hello to you," said. "She speaks English." Took the phone, feeling oddly nervous. "Hello." "Hello, Mr. Wellington?" A young girl's voice came through, slightly formal but friendly. "I wanted to thank you for helping my sister. Because of you, I can stay in school. When I grow up, I want to be a doctor and help people just like you're helping us." Felt his throat tighten. "That's wonderful. Your sister tells me you're an excellent student." "I try very hard," said proudly. "Always taught me that education is the key to everything. Now I believe it even more. She's at a famous university because someone believed in her and she made it happen. I want to do the same thing." They chatted for a few more minutes before had to go. When handed the phone back to, he saw tears in her eyes. "She idolizes you," said softly. "She's the reason I work so hard," said. "Her and my other siblings. I want them to see that dreams are possible, that we don't have to be limited by where we start. If I can make it here, maybe they can achieve their dreams too." "They will," said with certainty. "With you as their example, how could they not?" The moment of charged intimacy had passed, replaced by comfortable companionship. They spent the rest of the evening talking about family, her hopes for them, her plans to bring them to visit someday. Found himself offering to sponsor those visits, to help however he could. It felt natural to want to help them, to be part of his extended family in some way. As winter turned to spring, their relationship continued to deepen. Found himself sharing things with that he had never told anyone else. Stories about his childhood in foster care, the fear and loneliness that had driven his ambition. In turn, opened up about her own struggles, the pressure of being the eldest child, the guilt of leaving her family behind, the constant worry that she wasn't doing enough. They understood each other in a way that had never experienced with anyone else. Both had known poverty and powerlessness. Both had been given opportunities by someone who believed in them. Both were driven by the need to prove they deserved those opportunities and to help others the way they had been helped. But there were complications too. Social circle began to notice presence in his life. At a charity gala in March, he brought as his guest, introducing her simply as his household manager who was studying at Columbia. The looks they received, the whispered speculation, made his jaw tighten with anger. "They think I'm your mistress," said quietly as they left the event early. I could see it in their faces. "They're narrow-minded idiots," said sharply. "You're a brilliant student and an accomplished professional. What they think doesn't matter." "It matters to you," observed. "I can see it bothers you." Couldn't deny it. "I hate that they reduce you to a stereotype instead of seeing who you really are. You're worth 100 of those people." Touched his arm gently. "We need to talk about this. About us, about what people see when they look at us together. I'm a young black woman living in your home. You're a wealthy white man who's sponsoring me. Of course people are going to make assumptions." "Then maybe we need to make our arrangement more public and transparent," suggested. "Show them there's nothing to gossip about." But even as he said it, wondered if he was being entirely honest. Over the past 3 months, his feelings for her had grown beyond friendship. He looked forward to seeing her each day with an intensity that went beyond companionship. He noticed everything about her, the way she tucked her hair behind her ear when she was concentrating, the sound of her laugh, the intelligence in her eyes when she challenged his ideas. Was he falling in love with her? The thought terrified him. Their arrangement was built on a foundation of mutual benefit and respect, not romance. If he acted on his feelings and she didn't reciprocate, he could ruin everything. Worse, given the power imbalance in their relationship, his position as her sponsor and employer, any romantic overture from him could be seen as coercive. So said nothing, keeping his growing feelings locked away. He told himself it was enough to have in his life as a friend and companion. He didn't need more than that. But late at night, alone in his room while slept down the hall, couldn't help but wonder if she felt even a fraction of what he was experiencing. And if she did, what they could possibly do about it without jeopardizing everything they had built together. One evening in early April, came home to find visibly upset. She was sitting at the kitchen island with her laptop open, tears streaming down her face. "What's wrong?" asked immediately, alarmed. "Did something happen to your family?" "No, they're fine," said, wiping her eyes. "I just got an email from Professor. He wants to recommend me for a summer research position, a fully funded study of educational programs in rural Africa. It would mean traveling to 5 different countries, interviewing teachers and students, collecting data for a major research project." "That sounds amazing," said, confused about why she was crying. "Why are you upset?" "Because it means leaving you for 3 months," said. "And I know that sounds silly, we have an employer-employee relationship, I shouldn't feel this attached. But the thought of being away from you for that long, of not having our dinners and conversations, it makes me realize how much you've come to mean to me." Sat down next to her, his heart pounding. "You've come to mean a lot to me too," he said carefully, "more than I probably should admit." Looked at him, her dark eyes searching his face. "What are we doing? What is this thing between us? It started as a business arrangement, but it hasn't felt like that for a long time." "I know," said, "but I don't want to complicate things. You're here to study, to build your career. I'm your sponsor, your employer. If I told you how I really feel, it could mess everything up." "How do you really feel?" asked softly. Struggled with the answer. Part of him wanted to tell her everything, to confess that he thought about her constantly, that she had become the most important person in his life. But caution held him back. "I care about you," he said finally. "More than I've cared about anyone in a very long time, but I also don't want to put you in an uncomfortable position. Our arrangement works because we both benefit from it equally. If I made it personal, that balance could shift." Was quiet for a long moment. Then she reached out and took his hand, the same gesture she had made weeks earlier but with different meaning now. What if I told you it's already personal for me? She said. What if I said that coming home to you is the best part of my day? That I find myself wanting to share everything with you, not because you're my sponsor, but because you're the person I trust most in the world. Felt like his heart might burst. I don't want you to feel pressured. I have all the power in this relationship. Your visa, your education, your legal status here, it all depends on me. If you felt obligated to reciprocate my feelings because of that. Stop, interrupted firmly. Give me credit for knowing my own mind. I'm not some helpless girl who can't distinguish between genuine emotion and obligation. Yes, you have power in our arrangement, but I have power too. The power to walk away, to refuse, to set boundaries. I'm choosing not to do any of those things because what I feel for you is real. What do you feel? Asked, hardly daring to breathe. I'm falling in love with you, said simply. I've been fighting it because I thought it was impossible, that the circumstances of how we met made it wrong somehow. But tonight, thinking about leaving you for 3 months, I realized I don't want to fight it anymore. I want to be honest about what this is. Pulled her into his arms and came willingly. They held each other for a long moment, both trembling with emotion and relief. When they finally pulled apart, Cup's face in his hands. I'm falling in love with you too, he said. I have been for weeks, maybe from the moment I saw you sitting on that crate in the loading dock, proud and determined despite everything. But we need to be smart about this. We need to protect you. Protect me how? Asked. We need to make sure your status here doesn't depend solely on our personal relationship, explained. If we're going to be together, it can't be because you have no other choice. I want you to have options, independence, your own power in this. Smiled. That's exactly what Rose would have wanted. For both of us to choose each other freely, not out of obligation or necessity. They spent the rest of the evening making plans, would work with his lawyers to adjust visa status, potentially transitioning her to a student visa that didn't depend on his employment sponsorship. They would be transparent about their relationship with the people who mattered, but protect their privacy from gossips and speculation, and would take the research position, because it was an incredible opportunity that she deserved. 3 months will be good for us, said, though the thought of being apart hurt. It will prove that what we feel is real, that it survives distance and time. I already know it's real, said, but I agree that we should be careful, move slowly. We have time to figure this out together. That night they sealed their new understanding with their first kiss. It was sweet and tentative, full of promise and possibility. When they finally went to their separate rooms, both knew that something fundamental had shifted between them. Lay in bed, his mind racing. He had built a billion-dollar empire through careful planning and calculated risks, but falling in love with felt like the biggest risk of all. Because unlike business deals that could be unwound or contracts that could be renegotiated, this was his heart he was putting on the line. But looking back over the past 4 months, from that snowy Christmas Eve to this spring evening, realized that had already changed him in irreversible ways. She had taught him to value things beyond money and success. She had shown him that vulnerability could be strength. She had reminded him what it meant to really live instead of just exist. Whatever came next, whatever challenges they faced, knew he wouldn't trade what they had built together. Rose Wellington had given him one final gift, the chance to love and be loved by someone extraordinary, and he was going to make sure they honored that gift by building something real and lasting. Across the hall, lay in her bed with similar thoughts. She had come to America expecting employment and education. Instead, she had found a home, a partner, and a love that felt both terrifying and wonderful. The journey ahead would be complicated, filled with obstacles and questions, but for the first time since arriving in this country, felt certain about her path forward. The weeks leading up to his departure for Africa were both beautiful and bittersweet, and spent every possible moment together, exploring the relationship they had finally acknowledged. They took walks through Central Park as spring bloomed around them. They visited museums and tried new restaurants. They talked endlessly about everything and nothing, learning each other's dreams and fears. But there were complications, too. His business partner, Richard Hammond, confronted him one morning at the office. Richard was 10 years older than, a pragmatic man who had invested in his company early on and now served on the board of directors. We need to talk about your personal situation, Richard said, closing his office door behind him. The board is concerned. Looked up from his laptop, his expression carefully neutral. Concerned about what exactly? This girl living with you, the one from Nigeria, People are talking. They're saying you're taking advantage of her, that there's something inappropriate about the whole arrangement. Richard sat down heavily. I'm not here to judge your personal life, but this company can't afford a scandal. We're about to launch a major new product. We need our CEO to be above reproach. Felt anger rising but kept his voice level. Is not this girl? She's a brilliant Columbia student who I'm mentoring and sponsoring. Our relationship is completely legitimate and above board. Is it though? Richard leaned forward. She's young, foreign, dependent on you for her status in this country. Can you honestly say there's no power imbalance there? Can you guarantee that if this goes south, she won't claim you pressured her or took advantage? I would never do that, said sharply. I know you believe that, Richard said. But perception matters. The board wants you to end the arrangement, help her find other accommodations, transfer her sponsorship to a university program, create some distance. Do it cleanly and generously, but do it. Stood up, packing to the windows that overlooked the city. No. Be reasonable. I said no, turned to face Richard. Came here on a promise my grandmother made. I've honored that promise, and I'm going to continue honoring it. She's not going anywhere unless she chooses to leave. And if the board has a problem with that, they can bring it up at the next meeting, and I'll address their concerns directly. Richard sighed. You're putting a lot at risk for someone you barely know. I know her better than I've ever known anyone, said quietly. And yes, I'm willing to risk a lot for her. That's called caring about someone, Richard. You should try it sometime. Richard left looking frustrated, but knew the conversation wasn't over. The board would push harder, apply more pressure. He needed to move faster on securing independent status, making sure she wasn't vulnerable to these kinds of attacks. That evening told about the confrontation. They were having dinner at the penthouse, one of the intimate meals that had become their ritual. Maybe Richard is right, said, her expression troubled. Maybe I should find my own place, create some distance. I don't want to cause problems for your business. Absolutely not, said firmly. This is your home as much as mine. I'm not letting corporate politics dictate our lives. But what if they force you to choose? Asked. What if the board threatens your position? You've built that company from nothing. I won't let you lose it because of me. Reached across the table and took both her hands in his. Listen to me. I built that company to prove I could succeed, to show that a foster kid with nothing could become someone. But you've taught me that success means nothing if you're alone. If the board forces me to choose between the company and you, I already know which choice I'll make. You can't mean that, said, though her eyes shone with emotion. Wellington Technologies is your life's work. It was my life's work, corrected. But it's not my whole life anymore. You are, and I'm not losing you to protect a bunch of nervous investors who care more about appearances than truth. Stood and came around the table, settling into his lap and wrapping her arms around his neck. You're crazy, you know that? Brilliant and successful and completely crazy. Crazy about you, murmured against her hair. They held each other for a long moment, drawing strength from their connection. Then pulled back slightly, her expression serious. We need to be smart about this, she said. Not just walk away, but fight properly. We need to make sure everything is documented, transparent, completely legal. We need to show the board that our relationship is genuine and consensual, that there's no coercion or impropriety. My lawyers are already working on it, assured her. By the time you leave for Africa next month, your status will be independent of my sponsorship. You'll have a student visa tied to Columbia, not to me. And when you come back, if you choose to live here, it will be as my girlfriend, not my employee. I like the sound of that, said softly. Your girlfriend, it makes it real. They sealed the conversation with a kiss that grew heated. They had been taking things slowly, establishing their emotional connection before adding physical intimacy. But tonight, with the threat from the board hanging over them, both felt the urgency to claim their relationship fully. Later, as they lay together in bed for the first time, traced patterns on his chest. Tell me about Rose, she said. I want to understand the woman who brought us together. Thought about his grandmother, the memories both painful and precious. She was tough as nails, but had the biggest heart of anyone I've ever known. When I was 12, and in my 5th foster home, she showed up one day. Turned out I was her biological grandson, her daughter's son. My mother had struggled with addiction and died when I was young. Rose never knew I existed until a social worker tracked her down. She came for you, said. She fought for me, corrected. The foster system didn't want to place me with a woman in her 60s who traveled constantly for her charity work. But Rose was relentless. She hired lawyers, showed up at every hearing, convinced them she could provide stability. It took almost a year, but she got custody of me. That must have changed everything for you. It changed who I became, said. Rose didn't just give me a home, she gave me expectations, standards, a belief that I could be more than my circumstances. She pushed me to excel in school, helped me get into a good college, taught me about business and investing. But more than that, she taught me about dignity and compassion. That's why she did this, said thoughtfully. This whole arrangement with bringing me here, she wanted you to pass on what she gave you to help someone else the way she helped you. I think you're right, agreed. Rose always said that privilege comes with responsibility, that those who have been given much must give much in return. She wanted me to understand that my success should be a bridge for others, not a wall to separate me from people who are still struggling. She would be proud of you, said, of how you've honored her memory. I hope so, said, but I also hope she'd be happy about us, about this unexpected love that came from her last act of charity. Propped herself up on one elbow, looking down at him. It's not charity, though. That's what makes it beautiful. She gave us both opportunities, but we chose each other. Nobody forced this or arranged it. We found love in the middle of all the complications. Pulled her down for another kiss, marveling at how perfectly she fit against him. Everything about being with felt right, like puzzle pieces finally clicking into place. He had spent so many years building walls around himself, convinced that emotional connection was a weakness he couldn't afford, but had walked through those walls like they didn't exist, seeing the vulnerable man beneath the successful businessman. The next few weeks passed in a blur of activity. Lawyers successfully transferred sponsorship to a university program, giving her independent legal status. The immigration process went smoothly thanks to her excellent academic record and full scholarship. Meanwhile, prepared for a confrontation with his board of directors. The board meeting happened on a Tuesday morning in May. Walked into the conference room where 10 men and 3 women sat waiting, their expressions ranging from concerned to disapproving. Richard Hammond sat at the far end of the table, avoiding eyes. Let's address the elephant in the room, said without preamble. Some of you have expressed concerns about my personal life, specifically about, so let me lay out the facts clearly. He distributed folders containing documentation prepared by his legal team. Came to this country on a legitimate work visa, arranged by my late grandmother as part of a charitable educational program. I chose to honor my grandmother's commitment by sponsoring her studies at Columbia University. All documentation is in order and has been reviewed by immigration authorities. Paused, making eye contact with each board member. Recently, and I have begun a personal relationship. To ensure complete propriety, we have restructured her legal status so that it no longer depends on me in any way. She has an independent student visa tied to Columbia, where she is an honor student in their international education program. Her housing arrangement is her choice, not a condition of employment or sponsorship. That's all well and good, said one of the board members who had been most vocal in her concerns. But you must understand how this looks. A wealthy white CEO with a young black woman from Africa who started out in his employ. The optics are terrible. The optics reflect your assumptions, not our reality, said sharply. Is a brilliant, accomplished woman who happens to be from Nigeria. I'm a man who had the good fortune to meet someone extraordinary. Our relationship is based on mutual respect, shared values, and genuine affection. If you can't see that, perhaps you should examine your own biases. We're not questioning your intentions, Richard interjected. We're worried about how this will play in the media if it becomes public. Tabloid headlines, social media speculation, impact on the company's reputation. Then we control the narrative, said. We're transparent about our relationship, about how we met, about the legitimate nature of our connection. We don't hide like we have something to be ashamed of. Leaned forward. And if she changes her mind about the relationship, if things go sour and she decides to make allegations about pressure or coercion, you've put yourself in a vulnerable position. Life is about vulnerability, said. Yes, I'm taking a risk by loving someone and being open about it. But I'd rather take that risk than live in fear of human connection. My grandmother taught me that genuine relationships are worth more than all the money in the world. If you can't accept that, then perhaps it's time to discuss whether I'm the right person to continue leading this company. The room went silent, let the words hang in the air, a challenge and an ultimatum. He had spent years building Wellington Technologies, pouring his heart and soul into its success. But he meant what he said. He wouldn't sacrifice his relationship with to appease corporate anxiety. Finally, Robert, the oldest board member and an early investor in the company, spoke up. "I've known you for 15 years. I've watched you build this company through determination and integrity. I've never seen you compromise your principles for convenience." He looked around at the other board members. If says this relationship is legitimate and ethical, I believe him. And frankly, his personal life is his own business as long as it doesn't affect his ability to run this company. Which, last time I checked, it hasn't. We just had our most profitable quarter in company history. Several other board members nodded in agreement. The tension in the room began to ease, still looked skeptical, but she backed down. "Fine, but I'm putting it on record that I think this is a risk." Noted said, "Now can we move on to actual business?" The rest of the meeting proceeded normally, covering quarterly results, product launches, and strategic planning, but could feel the shift in dynamics. Some board members would always be suspicious of his relationship with. He would have to prove, through continued success and transparency, that his personal life enhanced rather than compromised his professional judgment. When he got home that evening, was studying at the dining table, surrounded by books and papers. She looked up when he entered, immediately reading his expression. "How bad was it?" she asked. "Not as bad as it could have been," said, collapsing onto the couch. "I laid out all the facts, made it clear I wasn't backing down. Most of the board accepted it, though some remained skeptical." Came to sit beside him. "I'm sorry you had to go through that because of me." "Not because of you," corrected, pulling her close. "Because some people can't look past their prejudices and assumptions, but we knew this wouldn't be easy." "It's going to get harder before it gets easier," said quietly. "When I'm in Africa this summer, there will be speculation about why I'm away. When I come back, people will watch us constantly, looking for signs that the relationship is fake or inappropriate." "Let them watch," said. "We know the truth. We know what we have is real and worth protecting." They spent the evening preparing for trip. She would leave in 2 weeks, spending 3 months traveling through Ghana, Kenya, Tanzania, Ethiopia, and Nigeria. The research project would be intensive, involving interviews with hundreds of teachers and students, collecting data about educational access and outcomes in rural areas. It was an incredible opportunity for his academic career. But it also meant their new relationship would face its first major test. 3 months apart, with limited communication due to spotty internet access in some of the villages would visit. They would have to trust in what they had built, believe that distance couldn't diminish what they felt. The night before his departure, they had dinner at his favorite restaurant, a small Italian place in the West Village that he had discovered years ago. They sat at a corner table, hands intertwined across the white tablecloth, talking about everything except the impending separation. "I got you something," said, pulling a small box from his pocket. "Don't worry, it's not an engagement ring. We're not there yet, but I wanted you to have something to remember while you're away." Opened the box to find a delicate gold necklace with a small pendant. The pendant was engraved with coordinates. "What are these numbers?" asked. "The latitude and longitude of where we met," explained. "The loading dock of Wellington Tower, the place where you arrived in rags and changed my life forever." His eyes filled with tears. "This is perfect. It's the most thoughtful gift anyone has ever given me." "There's a matching one," said, pulling an identical chain from under his shirt. "So we'll both carry that moment with us, no matter how far apart we are." They didn't return to the penthouse after dinner. Instead, they walked through the city streets, savoring their last hours together. They ended up at the Wellington Tower loading dock, the place where everything had begun less than 5 months ago. "I was so scared that night," said, looking at the spot where she had sat on a crate, cold and desperate. "I had been walking for hours, my feet were bleeding, and I thought maybe I had made a terrible mistake coming here." "I'm so glad you didn't give up," said. "So glad you had the courage to keep trying." "And I'm glad you saw past the rags and dirt to who I actually was," said. "You could have just sent me away, called social services or immigration. Instead, you took a chance on me." "Best decision I ever made," said, pulling her into his arms. They kissed in the exact spot where they had first met, their new necklaces glinting in the streetlight. It felt symbolic, a completion of a circle that had begun in winter desperation and led to spring love. The next morning drove to the airport. They had said their real goodbyes at home, but parting at the departure gate proved harder than either anticipated. Clung to him and had to fight back unexpected emotion. 3 months, he said. You'll be so busy you won't have time to miss me. I'll miss you every day, said. But I'll also make you proud. This research is going to be groundbreaking. You already make me proud, said. Just promise me you'll be safe, don't take unnecessary risks. I promise, said. And thank you for everything, for believing in me, for fighting for us, for being the person Rose knew you could be. Thank you for reminding me how to live, said. For teaching me that success means nothing without someone to share it with. One final kiss, and then was walking through security, turning back to wave one last time before disappearing into the crowd. Stood watching until he couldn't see her anymore, feeling both bereft and hopeful. The next 3 months would test them both, but believed in what they had built. He believed in strength and commitment, and he believed that when she returned, they would be ready to build a future together, one strong enough to withstand any skepticism or challenge the world threw at them. As drove back to the city, he touched the pendant around his neck, feeling the engraved coordinates. That loading dock had been the starting point of an incredible journey. He couldn't wait to see where that journey would take them next. The penthouse felt empty when returned. He wandered through rooms that had transformed with her presence, touching the books she had arranged on shelves, the plants she had carefully tended, the artwork she had chosen. Her absence was palpable, a silence that echoed through the space. But didn't let himself wallow in loneliness. Instead, he threw himself into work and into the projects cared about. He established a scholarship fund in Rose Wellington's name, specifically for young women from developing countries who wanted to study education. He partnered with international organizations working on rural education access. He used his wealth and influence to support the causes he was passionate about. Every few days, he would receive an email from, usually brief due to limited internet access. She wrote about the teachers she met, the students whose stories moved her, the data she was collecting. Her passion for the work shone through every word and felt proud knowing he had helped make it possible. But he also felt her absence acutely. No more dinners filled with animated conversation. No more mornings with the smell of coffee and the sound of laughter. No more quiet evenings reading together on the couch. The penthouse had become just a building again, impressive but soulless. Began to understand what his grandmother had been trying to teach him all along. That wealth and success were just tools, meaningless unless used to build something real and lasting. That human connection was the only thing that truly mattered. That love was worth any risk, any sacrifice, any challenge the world could throw at you. 2 months into his trip, received an unexpected video call. When he answered, his face filled the screen and felt his heart leap at the sight of her. I'm in my mother's village, said, her smile radiant despite the obviously poor video quality. I want you to meet someone. The camera shifted and saw an older woman with eyes and smile. She spoke in Igbo and translated. My mother says thank you for taking care of her daughter. She says Rose Wellington must have been a great woman to raise such a generous son. And she says she can see in your eyes that you love truly, and that makes her happy. Felt emotion tighten his throat. Tell her that is the greatest gift I've ever received, that I will spend the rest of my life being worthy of her. Translated, and her mother nodded approvingly. Then came other voices, siblings crowding into frame, excited to meet the man who had changed their sister's life. The aspiring doctor practiced her English by telling about her latest exam results. The younger siblings were shyer but curious, studying him through the camera with wide eyes. It was chaotic and wonderful, giving a glimpse into the family and culture that had shaped. When the call finally ended, he sat in the quiet penthouse with tears running down his face, not from sadness, but from overwhelming gratitude. He had everything he needed to be happy. Wealth, success, influence, but none of it had meant anything until walked into his life and showed him what truly mattered. Family, love, connection, purpose beyond profit. 1 more month and she would be home. 1 more month and they could start building their future together properly. Could hardly wait. But he also knew that when returned, they would face new challenges. Questions about their relationship would intensify. The media might pick up the story. His board would watch them carefully. Society would judge them through the lens of race, class, and power dynamics. None of that mattered, though, because had finally learned the most important lesson his grandmother had tried to teach him. That the only opinion that truly counted was your own conscience. That doing right by the people you loved was more important than managing perceptions. That sometimes the best thing you could do was trust your heart and let the rest of the world catch up. He touched his pendant again, feeling the coordinates that marked where his life had stood at the arrivals gate at JFK Airport, holding a single red rose and feeling more nervous than he had before any business presentation. It had been exactly 92 days since left for Africa, 92 days of sparse communication and lonely nights, 92 days of missing her presence in ways both large and small. The board from her flight finally appeared on the screen and his heart began to race. He watched anxiously as passengers streamed through the gate, searching every face for the one he needed to see. Then, finally, there she was. Looked different. Her skin was darker from months in the African sun, her hair was styled in intricate braids she hadn't worn before, and there was a confidence in her stride that spoke of growth and accomplishment. But when her eyes found his across the crowded terminal, the smile that lit her face was exactly the same, exactly what had been dreaming about for 3 months. She ran to him and caught her in his arms, lifting her off her feet as they embraced. Neither spoke for a long moment, just held each other and breathed in the reality of being together again. "I missed you," finally said against his chest, "so much more than I thought possible." "I counted the days," admitted, "every single one welcome home." They drove back to Manhattan with talking nonstop about her research trip. She had traveled to remote villages in 5 different countries, interviewed over 300 teachers and 1,500 students, collected data that would form the foundation of what she believed could be a revolutionary approach to rural education. "The things I saw," she said, her eyes shining with passion. "Teachers working in buildings with no roofs, students walking 10 miles each way to attend class, communities pooling their resources to pay for textbooks. The hunger for education is incredible, but the resources are so inadequate. I have so many ideas for how to change that." "Tell me everything," said, and she did. By the time they reached the penthouse, understood that had returned with not just research data but a mission, a purpose that would drive the next phase of her life. Inside the apartment, walked through the familiar rooms with a strange expression. "I dreamed about this place so many times," she said, "but now being here feels different somehow, like I've changed and the space hasn't." "Then we'll change it together," said. "Make it reflect who we both are now, not who we were before." That first night back, they talked until dawn. Shared stories about the people she had met, the challenges she had faced, and the insights she had gained. Told her about the scholarship fund he had established, the educational initiatives he had begun supporting, and how her passion had inspired him to use his wealth more purposefully. "You did all that while I was gone?" asked, touched. "I wanted to honor what you're trying to do," said. "And I wanted to show you that I'm serious about being your partner in this, not just romantically but in terms of the work that matters to you." Over the next few weeks, they settled into a new rhythm. Resumed her classes at Columbia, now in her 2nd year and taking more advanced courses. She began working on her research paper, a massive undertaking that would take months to complete. Continued running his company, but he made a conscious effort to maintain better work-life balance, coming home at reasonable hours and keeping weekends free for them to spend together. They also went public with their relationship, not in a flashy way, but honestly and openly. When attended charity galas, came as his girlfriend, not his employee. When asked about their relationship in interviews, was straightforward about how they met and how their connection had developed. He refused to be ashamed or defensive about loving. The public reaction was mixed. Some people celebrated their story, seeing it as a modern fairy tale about love overcoming circumstances. Others were critical, questioning the power dynamics and suggesting that was taking advantage of wealth or that was exoticizing a vulnerable woman. The criticism hurt, especially the insinuations that was somehow using, but they weathered it together, united in their knowledge of the truth. Their relationship was built on genuine affection, mutual respect, and shared values. What others thought couldn't change that reality. One particular article in a major newspaper was especially harsh, painting their relationship as inappropriate and suggesting that had essentially purchased a foreign woman to live with him. Was furious when he read it, ready to call his lawyers and demand retractions, but stopped him. "Let me respond," she said. "I want to speak for myself." Wrote an opinion piece for the same newspaper, a thoughtful and powerful essay about agency, choice, and the assumptions people make about African women. She detailed her own education, her professional qualifications, and her decision-making process. She spoke honestly about the power imbalances in their relationship and how they had worked to address them. But most importantly, she asserted her right to make her own choices about who to love and how to live her life. "I am not a victim in need of rescue," she wrote in the piece. "I am not a prop in someone else's story. I am an educated, capable woman who made deliberate choices about my future. If people cannot see me as anything other than a poor African girl dependent on a wealthy man's charity, that reflects their limited perspective, not my reality." The essay went viral, sparking national conversations about race, class, immigration, and relationships. Received hundreds of messages from other African women studying abroad, thanking her for speaking up, for refusing to be diminished by other people's narratives. Read the essay with tears in his eyes, overwhelmed with pride. This was the woman he loved, strong and articulate, refusing to be defined by anyone else's expectations or assumptions. She had taken potential scandal and transformed it into an opportunity for dialogue and education. The attention also brought unexpected opportunities. A major publishing house contacted about turning her research into a book. Several universities invited her to speak about her findings. Organizations focused on international education reached out about collaboration. What could have destroyed her reputation instead elevated it, showcasing her intelligence and passion. As summer approached, marking nearly a year since and had acknowledged their feelings for each other, began planning something special. He wanted to propose, to make their commitment official and permanent. But he also wanted to do it in a way that honored their story and respected independence. He flew to Nigeria without telling, meeting with her family to ask for their blessing. Her mother welcomed him warmly, though she looked at him seriously when they sat down to talk. "My daughter is precious to me," she said through a translator sister provided. "She has always been special, always determined to make something of herself. When Rose Wellington told me she wanted to take to America, I was frightened. I worried I would lose her forever, that she would forget her family and her home." "She thinks about you every day," assured her. "She calls you as often as she can. Everything she does is driven by her desire to honor you and help her siblings." "I know," her mother said, "and I see that you understand this about her. You understand that her strength comes from her family, from her roots. You don't want to erase that or replace it. That is good." "I want to marry your daughter," said directly. "But only if she wants to marry me, and only if you give us your blessing. I know there are concerns about our different backgrounds, about the circumstances of how we met. But I love with everything I am. I will spend my life making sure she can achieve all her dreams while honoring where she came from." His mother studied him for a long moment, then smiled. "Rose Wellington chose well. She found someone for who understands what matters. You have my blessing and my gratitude for treating my daughter with the respect she deserves." Spent 3 days with family, meeting extended relatives, learning about their culture and traditions, understanding the world that had shaped the woman he loved. Now 13 and even more determined to become a doctor, grilled him with questions about American universities and medical schools. The younger siblings gradually overcame their shyness, teaching him words in Igbo and laughing at his terrible pronunciation. When returned to New York, he carried with him a deeper appreciation for his journey and sacrifice. She had left this warm, close-knit family and familiar culture to pursue opportunities in a cold, foreign city. The courage that took was staggering. Planned the proposal for a significant date, December 24th, exactly 1 year after they had met. He arranged for them to return to Wellington Tower, to the loading dock where everything had begun. Was confused when he asked her to dress up for what he said was a special anniversary dinner. "We're just going to your office building," she asked as they pulled up. "Trust me," said, taking her hand. He led her down to the loading dock, which had been transformed. Thousands of tiny lights were strung across the ceiling, creating a canopy of stars. A small table was set with dinner for two, prepared by the same Italian restaurant where they had eaten before left for Africa. And on the concrete floor where had once sat on a crate, desperate and uncertain, rose petals spelled out a message. "Will you marry me?" Gasped, her hand flying to her mouth as tears immediately began to fall. Got down on one knee, pulling out a ring box. "1 year ago tonight, you arrived here in rags and I saw someone extraordinary," said. "You were cold and hungry and had every reason to give up, but you didn't. You stood there with such dignity and determination, and something in me recognized something in you. We were both looking for home. We just didn't know we would find it in each other. Breathed, unable to say more. This past year has been the best of my life, continued. You've taught me how to truly live, how to value what really matters, how to use my success to make a real difference. You've reminded me that strength doesn't mean building walls, it means having the courage to be vulnerable. I love you. I love your brilliant mind and your passionate heart. I love your determination and your compassion. I love how you challenge me to be better while accepting me exactly as I am. Opened the ring box, revealing a stunning diamond ring flanked by smaller stones of deep blue. The blue stones are sapphires from Nigeria, he explained. So you always carry a piece of home with you. Will you marry me? Will you build a life with me as true partners in everything? Yes, said immediately, laughing and crying at the same time. Yes, of course, yes. Slipped the ring onto her finger, then stood and pulled her into his arms. They kissed deeply, celebrating the promise they were making to each other. Around them, the loading dock that had witnessed lowest moment now witnessed one of her highest. How did you do all this? Asked when they finally pulled apart. The lights, the dinner, everything. I had help, admitted. Davis, the security guard who found you that night, he was happy to arrange everything. He said he knew from the beginning that you were going to change my life. They sat down to dinner, eating and talking and laughing beneath the canopy of lights. Told about his trip to Nigeria, about receiving her mother's blessing, about the time he spent with her family. Cried again, overwhelmed that he had made that journey without her knowing, that he had taken the time to understand where she came from. My grandmother would have loved you, said. She would have loved seeing how you transformed my life, how you reminded me of everything she tried to teach me. I wish I could have met her, said. I wish I could thank her for seeing something in me worth investing in. You thank her every day, said. By being exactly who you are, by achieving everything you're capable of, by loving me despite all my flaws. That's what Rose wanted, for both of us to become the best versions of ourselves. They finished dinner and walked back to the car hand in hand, Snoo ring catching the light. On the drive home, she kept looking at it, then as if she couldn't quite believe this was real. What are you thinking? Asked. I'm thinking about that terrified girl who sat in that loading dock a year ago, said softly. She was so scared, so uncertain about what would happen next. She had no idea that her life was about to change completely, that she was about to meet the person who would become her whole world. I was thinking the same thing, admitted. About the lonely man who almost didn't come down that night, who almost let Davis handle it without his involvement. What would have happened if I hadn't met you? I'd probably still be in that empty penthouse, working until midnight and wondering why success felt so hollow. We saved each other, said. That's what this is really about. Not a rich man saving a poor woman or a grateful woman giving a man purpose. We saved each other from lives that looked successful but felt incomplete. Over the next 6 months, they planned their wedding. Wanted 2 ceremonies, one in New York and one in Nigeria, honoring both the life they were building together and the heritage she came from. Agreed immediately, excited about the opportunity to celebrate their union with both of their communities. The New York wedding happened first in the spring. It was held at a beautiful botanical garden with flowers blooming all around them. Business associates attended, along with professors and fellow students from Columbia. David, lawyer who had helped legitimize their arrangement, gave a toast about watching 2 people navigate impossible circumstances with grace and determination. But it was Robert, the board member who had defended at that crucial meeting, who gave the most moving speech. I've known Wellington for 15 years, Robert said. I've watched him build an empire, create jobs, generate wealth, but I've never seen him truly happy until came into his life. She didn't just give him companionship. She gave him purpose beyond profit, passion beyond success. She reminded him that being human is more important than being successful. And in doing so, she made him a better CEO, a better leader, and a better man. Speech was simpler. Saw me when I was invisible. He believed in me when I had nothing to offer except potential and determination. He loved me not for what I could give him, but for who I was trying to become. That's the greatest gift anyone can give another person, to see them truly and love them anyway. The Nigerian wedding happened 3 months later, and it was completely different. Loud, joyous, filled with music and dancing and celebration that lasted for days. Wore traditional clothing in bright colors and did his best to participate in ceremonies he didn't fully understand but respected completely. Her family welcomed him with open arms, and the village where had once taught threw a festival in honor of their marriage. Standing in that Nigerian village, surrounded by people dancing and singing, felt a profound sense of completion. He understood now what his grandmother had been trying to teach him all along. That wealth was meaningless unless it built bridges between people. That success should create opportunities for others, not separate you from them. That the greatest privilege was being able to help others achieve their dreams while pursuing your own. After the wedding celebrations ended, and returned to New York to begin their married life. But they weren't returning to the same circumstances they had left. Had completed her master's degree with highest honors and had been accepted into Columbia's D program. Her research had been published in several academic journals, and she was being recognized as an emerging voice in international education policy. More importantly, she had established the Wellington Foundation, a nonprofit organization dedicated to improving educational access in rural Africa. The foundation would build schools, train teachers, provide technology and resources, and offer scholarships to students who had potential but lacked opportunity. It would be funded by wealth but guided by expertise and passion. "We're going to change thousands of lives," said as they reviewed the foundation's initial plans. "Think about all the children who will get opportunities they never would have had otherwise." "Just like Rose gave me an opportunity," said. "Just like I gave you an opportunity, now we're passing it forward." "Exactly," agreed. "That's what Rose understood. That generosity isn't just about giving money. It's about seeing potential in people and giving them the tools to realize it. It's about believing in someone when they have no reason to believe in themselves." As their first year of marriage passed, watched blossom in ways he had never imagined. She became a powerful advocate for educational reform, speaking at conferences and writing articles that challenged conventional thinking. She traveled frequently for her work, but always came home to him, to the partnership they had built together. Also changed. He stepped back slightly from the day-to-day operations of Wellington Technologies, appointing a president to handle routine matters while he focused on strategy and philanthropy. He spent more time on the foundation, using his business skills to make it as effective and impactful as possible. He learned that success wasn't about accumulating more wealth, but about using what he had to create positive change. One evening, almost 2 years after their wedding, came home with surprising news. "I'm pregnant," she said, her hand on her still flat stomach. "We're going to have a baby." Felt joy surge through him, followed quickly by a wave of emotion so intense he had to sit down. A baby. A child who would grow up loved and secure, who would never know the loneliness and uncertainty he had experienced. A child who would be raised by two people who understood the value of opportunity and the importance of using privilege responsibly. "Rose would be so happy," said, pulling into his arms. "This is what she wanted all along, not just for me to be successful, but to have a real family, a real life." "We'll name her Rose if it's a girl," said, "after the woman who brought us together." It was a girl. Rose Wellington was born on a snowy December evening, almost exactly 3 years after had arrived in that loading dock. Held his daughter for the first time and felt his entire world shift. This tiny person, part him and part, represented everything good that could come from taking risks on people, from believing in love, from honoring commitments even when they seemed impossible. His family came from Nigeria for the birth, filling the penthouse with warmth and laughter. Now 16 and preparing to apply to American universities to study pre-medicine, was especially enchanted with her new niece. "She's going to change the world," declared, "just like her parents." As watched his wife surrounded by family, holding their daughter while her mother sang Nigerian lullabies, he thought about the journey that had brought them here. It had started with his grandmother's vision, with her belief that people deserved opportunities regardless of their circumstances. It had continued with courage, her refusal to give up even when everything seemed lost. And it had been sustained by their mutual recognition of something precious in each other, something worth fighting for. The critics had been wrong. Their relationship wasn't about power or exploitation or inappropriate dynamics. It was about two human beings who had found each other at the exact moment they both needed saving. It was about building something real from circumstances that could have been tragic. It was about love transcending all the barriers society tried to place between people. On Christmas Eve, made his annual pilgrimage to his grandmother's grave, this time bringing and baby Rose with him. The cemetery was quiet, snow falling gently over the headstones. knelt beside Rose Wellington's grave and spoke softly. "I brought them to meet you, Grandma. This is the incredible woman you chose for me even though I didn't know I needed her. And this is your great-granddaughter, named in your honor. We're building the life you always wanted for me, filled with love and purpose and meaning. Thank you for seeing past my walls to the lonely boy who needed to learn how to love. Thank you for finding and giving her the chance to shine. Thank you for everything." Placed flowers on the grave, then said her own prayer of gratitude to the woman she had never met but who had changed her entire life. Baby Rose slept peacefully through it all, wrapped warm against the winter cold. As they walked back to the car, looked at his wife and daughter and felt overwhelmed with gratitude. 3 years ago, he had been a successful but empty man, going through the motions of a life without real meaning. Now he was a husband and father, a partner in meaningful work, a man who understood that true success came from the relationships you built and the lives you touched. "What are you thinking?" asked, seeing the expression on his face. "I'm thinking about that Christmas Eve when you arrived in rags," said. "How lost and lonely we both were, how neither of us knew what was about to happen. And now look at us," said, smiling. "Building a family, changing lives through the foundation, creating something beautiful from what could have been nothing." "Rose knew," said with certainty. "She knew exactly what she was doing when she found you in that Nigerian village. She saw two broken people who could make each other whole. She saw past the obvious obstacles to what was possible. She believed in us before we believed in ourselves." "That's what love does," said softly. "It sees potential instead of problems. It builds bridges instead of walls. It creates possibilities that logic says shouldn't exist." They drove home through the snowy streets, their daughter sleeping peacefully between them. Inside the penthouse that had once been so cold and empty, warmth and life now filled every room. Family photos covered the walls. Children's toys were scattered across the floor. The smell of cooking spices and baby powder mixed in the air. It was messy and imperfect and absolutely perfect. That night, after putting Rose to bed, and stood at their bedroom window looking out at the city. 3 years ago, had stood at this same window feeling hollow despite all his success. Now, with beside him and their daughter sleeping nearby, he felt complete in a way he had never imagined possible. "I love you," said, pulling close. "Thank you for taking a chance on me, for seeing past the billionaire to the lonely man underneath, for building this life with me." "I love you too," said. "Thank you for seeing me when I was invisible, for believing in me when I had nothing, for recognizing my worth when I was dressed in rags." They kissed softly, celebrating the miracle of having found each other against all odds. Outside, snow continued to fall over Manhattan, blanketing the city in white peace. And in a loading dock 3 blocks away, the place where two lives had collided and changed forever, a small plaque had been installed. It read, "Sometimes the greatest gifts come in unexpected packages. Sometimes love finds you when you're not even looking. Sometimes a chance encounter changes everything." December 24, 3 years ago, two souls met here and discovered that home isn't a place, it's a person. The black mail-order girl who arrived in rags on Christmas Eve had found her worth, not because a billionaire recognized it, but because she had always possessed it. And the billionaire had found his purpose, not in wealth or success, but in loving and being loved by someone extraordinary. Together, they had built something beautiful from impossible circumstances, proving that with courage, compassion, and commitment, any story could have a happy ending. But this wasn't really an ending at all. It was just the beginning of a lifetime of love, partnership, and meaning. The beginning of raising a child together and building a foundation that would help thousands. The beginning of showing the world that relationships built on genuine respect and affection could transcend any barrier society tried to impose. As and finally went to bed that night, wrapped in each other's arms, they both felt the same deep sense of gratitude. For Rose Wellington's wisdom in bringing them together. For the courage they had both shown in taking chances on each other. For the love that had grown from the most unlikely circumstances into something unshakable and true. The girl in rags had become a powerful advocate for change. The lonely billionaire had become a devoted husband and father. Together, they were living proof that worth isn't determined by circumstances, that love knows no boundaries, and that sometimes the best things in life come from the most unexpected places. And somewhere they both believed, Rose Wellington was smiling, satisfied that her final gift to her grandson had been exactly what he needed. Not money or property or possessions, but the chance to love and be loved, to find meaning beyond success, To understand that the greatest wealth of all is having someone to share your life with who sees you truly and loves you anyway. This was their story, imperfect and complicated and absolutely beautiful. And they were just getting started. Why begun? Not in the foster homes or the dorm rooms or the corporate offices, but in a loading dock on Christmas Eve, when a young woman in rags had looked at him with fierce dignity and changed everything. Smiled, looking forward to the future with hope and certainty. Whatever came next, he and would face it together, and that made all the difference. She was exactly where she was meant to be, with exactly who she was meant to be with. And that certainty was worth more than any job title or living arrangement. It was the foundation on which she would build the rest of her life. Asleep that night was the truest magic of all. In the morning, everything would change. But tonight, in the quiet penthouse on Christmas Eve, two unlikely people had found unexpected shelter from their respective storms. And that felt like the truest Christmas miracle of all.